Hi guys, Professor Baobab here, and as promised, today we're going to talk about Baxcalibur, the Ice Dragon Pokemon. First, Baxcalibur starts his life as a young Arctibax, and then it becomes a Frigibax, and these are both known as the Ice Fin Pokemon, and later in its life, its final form is Baxcalibur, the Ice Dragon Pokemon. Baxcalibur are the only Ice-type Pokemon that are found in the Dragon Egg group. However, we know that Baxcalibur are not the only Pokemon that possess the Dragon Ice combination, as Kyurem also is a Dragon Ice type. However, Baxcalibur is interesting to study, and perhaps we could talk about Kyurem next. That would be very interesting to study. But I enjoyed studying Baxcalibur as the area of Paldea is quite formidable. Obviously, there's Area Zero, there's the Great Crater of Paldea, which is by all means a mystery. But if we look on the outskirts of the Great Crater, in the Glacidio Mountain area, we find, or we can find at least, after much difficulty, no less, we can find Frigibax. Frigibax are very weak Pokemon, relatively speaking, because they seem not to be so well adapted to their environment. However, we do know that through their dorsal fins, they absorb thermal energy from their surroundings and use it for their survival. So we have studied, after studying Frigibax for some time, we've been able to discern that in the Glacidio Mountains, Frigibax actually don't require much food to survive. So why are their numbers so low, you may ask? They are seemingly endangered. Well, the answer is competition, but obviously not competition for food, competition for space. You see, you will find Cetoddle and Cetitan aplenty, and they basically monopolized space on the Glaciado Mountains, meaning that until they grow up into Baxcalibur, Frigibax are hapless creatures. At any rate, Frigibax are learning their environment, so they have evolved to be able to absorb thermal energy from the surroundings through their dorsal fin, and that powers their bodies. So they harvest thermal energy. Even though Glaciado Mountain is already cold, they are able to harvest the thermal energy because the dorsal fin is actually colder than even the surrounding. So that temperature gradient allows heat from the environment to flow naturally into the dorsal fin, and if the conditions are particularly trying, it is also possible for the Frigibax to actively pump heat out of the dorsal fin to increase the rate of heat transfer into the dorsal fin. And the way the transfer is directly into different forms of energy that are useful for Frigibax, such as chemical energy, which allows for the formation of new cells, and eventually the Frigibax will become Arctibats. One curious thing that is of note is that Frigibacks can also use the thermal energy to another advantage, and that advantage is to cause the surroundings to actually become cooler. So it not only heats up its own body, but also cools down the surroundings at the same time, making it equivalent in function to a refrigerator. And in doing so, it can warm its nest. And so we find typically Frigibacks gathering in small groups at a time, and due to this, there tends to be little opportunity for Frigibacks to survive if all of a sudden, for example, Sir Titan drive them out. And when Sir Titan do this, by the way, they are often very intrusive, and so they can easily stampede a small group of Frigibacks, and that small group of Frigibacks could be led to their demise. Hence why they're so endangered that they are. But at any rate, let's say the Frigibacks survive the ordeals of that they find themselves in Glaciada Mountains, then they become Frigibacks, which is essentially the adolescent form of Baxcalibur, and they start to learn the ropes, so to speak, and they form defensive features and also offensive features. The defensive feature is namely the ice mask that is covering their face. So the way that they create that, again, they're starting to master the process of cooling their surroundings, and so they are able to direct now this flow of thermal energy so that they can actually cool to below the freezing point of water, that area that is right around their face, to form an ice mask. As you can surmise, Arctibacks is now becoming more efficient at transferring thermal energy into other forms of energy that are useful for it, and that means also that it's able to transfer more thermal energy. And the corollary of that is that the stronger the Frigibacks becomes, or alternatively, the more the Frigibacks develops in age as well as in physical endurance, just withstanding the aggressive conditions that it finds itself in, the thicker its hide becomes, the stronger is the mask that it can form over its face. This is good because what it means is that eventually these Frigibacks will be able to develop further with fewer threats and ultimately become Baxcalibur. Now, I also mentioned that Arctibacks develop aggressive features as well, aggressive capabilities, and this is most well known in their ability to use their fins as weapons. So while they're growing, they happen to have accelerated development in their back legs, and so that allows them to jump and spin in the air to use their dorsal fins as a weapon. And obviously, the reason they do this is to fight off imposters in their territory. And by the way, their territories are growing as they become more independent. So they're not only relying less on their comrades, their conspecifics, as it were, but they are also becoming essentially more confident. After all, Glaciado Mountain is their home territory, so it makes sense that they would thrive there. However, as I already said, it just so happens that the Titan also have the Glaciado Mountains as their home territory, and so there's this rivalry between them. Okay, now once the Frigibax has eventually asserted its dominance, so to speak, it is now becoming more and more powerful and more defensive at the same time. So we can look specifically at its overall stats, and indeed Baxcalibur is a pseudo-legendary Pokemon. We can indeed see that from Baxcalibur's stats that its attack is quite high. It's its highest stat. Its defense is not so high, but nonetheless we can definitely see that it's an improvement over Frigibax and Artifacts. So we can see that while it is developing in its defense, it is growing more in its offense, in its attack. It's prioritized its attack. Now, the reason why it's prioritized its attack is still being debated, but one possible theory is that now that Baxcalibur is fully grown, it now views the Titan as a worthy opponent, as a worthy challenger, essentially. And the results are not pleasurable. Certainly, I can surely declare that, just in case you were wondering that, because I don't know why you should wonder that anyway. It's not something that someone should think about in their everyday experience, I think. Let's move on. So Baxcalibur has a few notable things that we can think about. First of all is that it has a signature ability called Thermal Exchange. It has this ability from the beginning of its life. So as a Frigibax, it has this ability, Thermal Exchange. What Thermal Exchange practically does is give these Pokemon some kind of resilience to fire, to heat, to thermal energy. And I've already explained how it acts as a refrigerator. It absorbs thermal energy, it converts that energy, it transfers that energy rather, into other forms of energy. It could be heat energy, but it likely would be something like chemical energy to essentially reform its body, to make new cells, etc., repair new cells, etc. Repair cells, not repair new cells. But another adaptation of being able to absorb thermal energy from the surroundings is being able to withstand an influx of thermal energy. So obviously Baxcalibur is an ice Pokemon, and so it is going to receive 2 times damage from a fire type move. However, it does not get burned. And the reason for this is twofold, I believe. It could be more, it could be less. But what we've seen is that, at least in Frigibax, because as I said, they all have thermal exchange from day one, the cells of Frigibax contain 2 major components. One is a heat shock protein, and the other is essentially an antifreeze protein. So the first one is a heat shock protein, and this is actually not necessarily just to do with heat. So we have heat shock proteins. Heat shock proteins do quite a lot in humans. In humans, heat shock proteins can, for example, stop cells from dying. It can help improve the immune response to certain infections, to certain diseases, even cancers. It can also help to heal wounds and recover tissue. How does this relate to Baxcalibur then? Well, in Baxcalibur, the obvious role of a heat shock protein is to respond to a heat shock. If Baxcalibur suddenly receives a lot of heat from, let's say, flamethrower, and obviously this is a stark contrast to the normal temperatures in Glaciado Mountains that it's used to, that's going to is going to cause an upregulation or the increased release, production and release of these heat shock proteins, and that's what's going to grant Baxcalibur the immunity to burning. In fact, it evolved to produce so much heat shock protein that even its attack is raised. So it actually induces also the release of adrenaline, and adrenaline causes spikes in the blood of Baxcalibur, resulting, and this is my theory anyway, resulting in in essentially what is a fight or flight response, causing the attack stats in particular to increase. Because as we've already discussed, Baxcalibur prioritized the attack stat through whatever mechanism, through whatever means. Then there are the antifreeze proteins. Now, it has been recorded that Baxcalibur could theoretically flash freeze or vitrify lava. Now, lava has a temperature of roughly 1000 degrees Celsius. To flash freeze or vitrify meaning turning into a glassy substance, because when you flash freeze something that is liquid, it turns into glass. This is why quenching certain materials, such as quenching steel, liquid steel, molten steel, can result in a substance with different properties than slowly cooling that same steel. It has been theorized that if Baxcalibur could liquefy helium in the atmosphere, and helium has a boiling point of minus 269 degrees Celsius, then it could explosively release that helium, because if it had liquid helium, then the liquid, it only needs a small amount of liquid to produce a large volume of gas, then that could, theoretically at least, flash freeze or turn into glass, vitrify lava. This is a good, happy ending for Vegibags. Living in harsh conditions, being cased everywhere by Toddle and Titan, I can imagine how difficult that must be, essentially leading a nomadic lifestyle. But then, eventually, with enough determination, with enough courage, with enough stamina, it will become a mighty Baxcalibur, which is truly if I should say, the ruler of Glaciado Mountain. If you see one in action, you would not go anywhere near it. You can trust me. It is truly formidable. Even Sir Titan are sometimes scared of Baxcalibur. They are really powerful and overbearing even. Anyone who has a Baxcalibur, a domesticated Baxcalibur, I should say, I'm really impressed by, because these Pokemon are pseudo-legendary, as I've already said, and they have a tremendous force. Now, just to close here, one of the interesting features of Baxcalibur, from its early life all the way to when it becomes a Baxcalibur, is the fact that it has this dorsal fin, and this dorsal fin develops with age, as we can tell and see. So at the start, Frigibax is really just getting used to, if so to speak. Obviously, it's autonomic, meaning that it's doing it by default, automatically. It's engineered essentially by evolution to absorb thermal energy from the surroundings and then dissipate it immediately, so that dorsal fin is always cooler than the surroundings, so that the flow of energy is into its dorsal fin. But then as it grows, it becomes more and more like a weapon. It becomes more and more refined. We start to see like a jagged pattern. It becomes more and more like a blade, almost like a certain sword. And eventually, it becomes Baxcalibur. Now, amusingly enough, Excalibur is obviously the name of the sword, the epic sword that many of us will have heard of from legends, and wherever you hear the tale from at first. But there's also another Excalibur that is a hand axe. And this Excalibur, or this hand axe, is supposed to depict human creativity, human ingenuity, and the development of humanity, in fact. Obviously, we have much better weapons, much better tools than simple hand axes that you hold in a cumbersome way. It doesn't even have a handle. And I think this is exemplified in Baxcalibur's ontogeny, which means it's the development of its life during its lifetime. Because we see Frigibax using its dorsal fin passively. And then eventually it starts to use it in more creative ways. It starts to use it first for attacking, and then secondly, perhaps simultaneously in fact, this is something that I just thought I might add in, the use of it to divert thermal energy from the surroundings, and essentially to eventually produce its cryogenic breath. So that's the story of Baxcalibur. It's one of survival, definitely, but it's also one of creativity and ingenuity. It reflects the ingenuity and even the survival of the human race. After all, we weren't too dissimilar from Frigibax at one point. We were not, I shouldn't say stranded, but we were like living nomadic lifestyles, being chased by this lion, this one here, this whatever disaster awaits us over there. And so we were going from place to place, not really having a place to permanently rest in, because we were always being either chased by something or somewhere became inhospitable and we didn't know what to do about it, until eventually we started to do things. We started to build tools, weapons, shelters, societies that enabled us to win our surroundings. Just like Baxcalibur is winning at its surroundings, its natural habitat, quite literally in this case. So that was Baxcalibur. Next time, I think it will be, as I said, very interesting to look at Curum. I would love that, in fact. But let me know if you have any idea for the next video. I'm enjoying this process. Obviously, my job is all about finding more about these Pokemon, dispelling myths, and really providing a gateway for people to understand science in the Pokemon world better, because there are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of misunderstandings. So thank you for watching, and please subscribe if you enjoy this video.